Morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's 9:30. Madam Clerk, I believe we have quorum. We do. So I'll call this meeting to order. Sorry, Rob. It's 9:30, September 24th for our Budget and Finance Committee. We will call the meeting to order. Is there any declaration of interest related to any item on today's agenda? Not seeing any. If one should arise, you can declare it at any time. We don't have any delegations, I don't believe. So we'll move right on to items for discussion and direction. We're going to have a presentation on capital from long-term care. Miss Jennifer is here this morning to lead us through that. So Jen, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, committee. Okay. Minor detail, really. And are you, okay. We'll just get the presentation up on the screen. All right. Good morning. Nice to see everyone. Okay. I am here to give an overview of the long-term care capital process. And with me, I have Marcus Tarko, who's the manager, and he is here to help us answer any questions. So the presentation is just going to give you a little bit of information, a high-level overview of the department, our funding sources, what we see as capital assets, how we go about identifying and timing our projects, determining and tracking the budget, a little bit about Rockwood Terrace redevelopment, and some home-specific highlights. So as you all know, the department overview, long-term care, is made up of our 3 long-term care homes, Grey Gables in Markdale, Lee Manor in Owen Sound, and Rockwood Terrace in Durham. Grey Gables is home to 66 residents. It was originally the House of Refuge, built in 1903. And in 2021, Maple Lane transitioned to the Behavioral Support Transition Unit. Lee Manor is home to 151 residents, opened in 1973 and refurbished in 2006. It was a joint development by the Lee Estate, the City of Owen Sound, and the County of Grey in the province of Ontario, and historically has approximately 66 people moving in each year, although that is trending up. And Rockwood Terrace is home to 102 residents, opened in 1984, has approximately 41 people moving in each year, and is currently in the redevelopment process. Wanting to just highlight on this slide the differing ages of the buildings. Each building does have a building supervisor or a maintenance manager that oversees the bulk of the assets, including the bricks and mortar. And who do we serve? Well, we have our 319 residents. We have 640 staff, 250 designated care partners, 36 volunteers, and lots of students and other health partners. Our capital funding sources are the Ministry of Long-Term Care. They provide funding for comprehensive minor capital, and these are very specifically outlined eligibility. Their criteria for minor repair and upkeep of long-term care homes. This government has been bundling together funding streams that were little pots of money for specific items and have been bundling them together into one fund called the Comprehensive Minor Capital. And that's at a prescribed rate of $55.69 per bed per month. Long-term care, home-specific reserves, and Grey County taxation. As we've discussed briefly, our capital assets are our bricks and mortar. parking lots, et cetera, and as well as our equipment. So everything from nursing equipment like lifts, lift equipment, to dietary, kitchen equipment, laundry equipment, HEPA filters, sanitization equipment. Those are all of the items that land on the capital asset list. So how do we identify and determine our projects? How do we plan? How do we build our 10-year plan? We rely heavily on our building condition assessment report. It's very helpful to have one document that outlines each piece of equipment, each asset, its life cycle, its predicted end of life, the cost of replacement, the cost. So we tool a lot. And then the other, we use a Works Hub software program for our preventative maintenance. So our building and maintenance team has a very rigorous preventative maintenance program that looks at all of our equipment, all of our assets on a cycle. We track that information and we use that information to make good decisions. We have items bundled into ongoing cycles like beds, mattresses, and lifts. As I said, we review our asset condition regularly to adjust the replacement. We have our partners supporting us with our lifts is Arjo. They have a service program that also supports making sure that our equipment is in good working condition, is safe for the residents and the team members using it. We have scheduled replacement or upgrades, like painting is on a scheduled cycle. And then we have provincial funding and provincial directions. So these are a little harder to predict. Those might be specialized funds that come available due to external factors, such as air conditioning, sprinkler systems. Those are some examples of items that have come up in the past. And like the other departments, we use our request for proposal. We use a quote system to make sure that we are being fiscally responsible. Our project timelines are adjusted to accommodate infection prevention and control protocols, minimize disruption to vulnerable residents. And we have monthly finance and procurement meetings with the executive directors, the maintenance leaders of each home, so that we are checking in on our projects. How are the projects that are actively in play? How are they going? What's next on the list? What's the status? What are things running over? Did things cost too much? Did it come in too high? Where are there opportunities to make adjustments? And those meetings happen on a monthly basis. And Rockwood Terrace redevelopment. For members of this committee that have been part of the Long-Term Care Committee of Management and our discussions for budget and capital planning for Rockwood Terrace over the years, you will recall that we've been only making repairs at Rockwood for risk and safety. So we're holding off on making significant repairs if we're able to make the item safe and then move it over to the new build. We are looking at opportunities, though, with the transition to the new Rockwood Terrace for inventory opportunities for the other two homes. So as you recall, the new Rockwood needs to be completely turnkey, ready to go for residents moving in, which means that the existing Rockwood Terrace will still have a number of assets that are in very good condition, like beds, mattresses, some lifts, that kind of thing. So we're looking at opportunities to perhaps take a bit of a holiday in purchasing new beds and mattresses for Grey Gables and Lee Manor, if we're able to have some of the good condition equipment from Rockwood go to the other two homes. So we're in the stages of exploring that. Fixtures, furniture, and equipment is a huge topic that we spend a great deal of time on in preparing for the new Rockwood Terrace. And it gives us an opportunity to look at leading practice and opportunities to be more efficient and upgrade assets in the other two homes. And operational readiness for 2026, just wanted to note that there is a report coming to the task force this afternoon talking about that operational readiness and the budget impacts of having two buildings running at the same time for a short period of time. And finally, just some home-specific examples of items that are on the 10-year capital. So at Grey Gables, there's an ongoing cycle of replacement for copper replacement. The plumbing fixture is a 2025 to 2028 project. So we try to look at opportunities to be successful in having our capital projects happen and spread that over a period of time. We can't go in and replace 66 plumbing fixtures all in 1 year. And then nurse call replacement, you'll see it on Grey Gables and Lee Manor. And this is an example of where we have paused a replacement at one of the homes to be able to align with the Rockwood Terrace rebuild. So we're trying to be efficient, make good decisions. We're trying to have consistency across the 3 homes for repair, for ease of use, that kind of thing. So Grey Gables and Lee Manor have nurse call replacement on their 10-year capital to align with the nurse call system that's going into the new Rockwood. Lee Manor has building automation system on their 10-year capital. And again, this is an opportunity to look at efficiencies and savings. And nursing station modernization is another item on the 10-year capital for Lee Manor. And this was an opportunity to improve privacy and efficient use of space for the team members and for the residents. And Rockwood Terrace, we've talked about a little bit, and I'll just highlight for those of you that are coming out this afternoon, we'll be able to show you an example of the new beds that we're getting, which is not only leading practice, but it's an opportunity for safety for the residents and for the team members. So right now, when new technology comes out and new systems, they are added on to the existing. So the bed is an example where everything is built in. So there's alarm system, there's fall prevention systems, there's lighting that supports that. And we're excited to be able to see that, trial it at Rockwood, and see if that's something that we want to move to the other 2 homes. That is the presentation. Happy to answer any questions if there are any. Oh.
Thank you, Jen. Before I go to questions, I need a mover and a seconder, maybe please, to receive the report. Councillor Nielsen, Councillor Deckard. Councillor Nielsen, you had a question. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a quick question. I know like our BCA study, and I know staff have commented before on capital process that the asset management plan, the BCA studies, nothing's replaced until it actually needs to be replaced, right? So we do those calculations. But when it comes to the long-term care homes, because it's a healthcare facility, are there items that have to be replaced on a certain schedule? Like I think of our firefighters for volunteer firemen says your firefighter equipment has a life expired and then it's done. You need to shift it over. Is there a lot of equipment that ends up having the same process?
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I would say we don't mess around with lift equipment. So if the contractor recommends something is at the end of its life for lift and transfer equipment, we absolutely follow those guidelines. But for the most part, with our preventative maintenance program and our partnerships with contracted suppliers, we are able to look at things like how often has it been repaired? If it's been repaired a number of times, perhaps it is time to make that replacement, or it seems to be going just fine. So we're going to put those funds in reserves. We're going to keep an eye on the item, and then we'll be able to make that replacement when it fails or stops working. But for the most part, we're able to take that same approach as other departments.
Thank you, Jen. Any other questions? Councillor Mackey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jen, thank you for the report. The prescribed funding of $55.69 that the ministry provides per month per bed. I suspect that is well under what our actual costs would be for maintenance. So maybe through you to Marcus, just wondering what our actual expense would be in that regard and what the shortfall is, I guess.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I will invite Marcus to the podium.
Specific finance question. It's perfect for me. Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the comprehensive minor capital that comes in is a fairly new funding one to alleviate the repair and maintenance, general wear and tears. How we've handled it, and that is there's plenty of unexpected costs that come up for us to apply to it. So what you did see was that back about 2 years ago, we were able to alleviate a little bit of our repair and maintenance expenditures on the operating side between the homes to actually effectively using it to say, okay, we can offset this. And then beyond that, it's being used for capital projects that come up as upsets or maybe if they have an increased cost. So it's a very hard one to say, since even though we can show you, for instance, that Lee Manor has an annual levy for our capital reserve intake of 154,000. In 1 year, they could be spending 800,000 or something like that. So it's not something that is a clear indication to say, oh, this is offsetting completely because it's against our 10-year. It's more or less used to weather the storms of unexpected costs and that kind of stuff that come up, which is great for us to be able to come and say, okay, we're not coming to committee of management and that to say we need additional funds to cover one. What I will also just add as another note is that this is one source of funding that has been consistent. The other one that consistently comes up is one-time funding for a very specific niche example. And then they say, after you've completed that, you can spend it on what you will. So for instance, we went through one where it was fire AC, so air conditioning, making sure that all of our homes are temperature controlled. Latest one was fire suppression. It's not hard for you to look in the news that another long-term care home had a serious issue with it. So the province said, okay, everybody here is an X amount that's been allocated towards you. Please use it for your fire suppression, but if it's in good working order, then you can use it for other capital projects. So we get a lot of event-driven funding as well when it comes to pressures that might exist across the province as well.
Thank you, Marcus. Councillor Eccles. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, probably to Jen. I see at Grey Gables, you mentioned that we're still replacing copper piping. Is this going to be like a life cycle? The building probably has another 50 years and we've been at it for 20 years now. Oh,
Thank you for the question through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so we have been replacing the copper at Grey Gables for about 10 years. So we're just about at the end of the replacement process. I can't tell you the specifics other than we're using a better material for an industrial building than what has been built, what it was built with. And so we were having some issues with pitting and leaks, and we wanted to not be just replacing the leaks and the pitting. So we started about 10 years ago doing that replacement, and we should be soon at the end of that copper replacement, and then we won't need to be doing the replacement of copper. We'll have replaced it all. And the building is 25 years old, so I think that copper replacement need happened earlier than we would have anticipated. But we are at that 25-year mark where we're starting to see items that need to be replaced, unfortunately.
did we ever get any warranty work done on that from the contractors that built it? Or are we expecting that check to come soon?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. When I joined the team the time for warranty would have passed. So I don't know if anyone has memory before that. I suspected you might. But Marcus did indicate he had something that he wanted to add around that copper replacement.
Maybe not even just
Okay.
copper replacement, but when in regards to warranty has become it's a rising issue or thorn in our side for a lot of these things. So for instance, last year, 2 years ago, we did a fairly significant air handler expansion and replacement to Lee Manor. And last year, one of the condensers failed on us at it was at 12 months and 18 days. And the warranty was for exactly 12 months. And they said, well, too bad, so sad. So we've been experiencing it across the board that a lot of these warranties that we might have aren't exactly the most wholesome, oh yeah, we'll honor that, or we have some goodwill, faith, or anything like that. So unfortunately, that's a rising trend, at least with us. I imagine it is with the rest of the county as well.
I will just add that these experiences have not been for naught. We've made sure that these are the kinds of questions that we asked during the design stage for the Rockwood Terrace build, to make sure that we don't find ourselves as much as possible in a similar situation.
Thank you. Sometimes those warranties can be a bit of a pipe dream. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. A pleasure to be sitting on this side with you today. So you've got some company over here. It's us versus them. I do have a question kind of falling out of Councillor Mackey's question. Yes, this is capital budget, but a little bit of his question struck me as a level of service. And I'm wondering, do you get comparatives from the private sector, private long-term care homes in terms of comparing costs? Councillor Mackey's question was funding versus the deficit to the actual cost of repairs. Can you stack that against what it is in the private realm?
Comparing against the private sector is a fairly large, difficult task for us to do, as they're not exactly the most saying, here's our books and here's exactly what we're doing on a per one. I will say, however, when we do get some comparisons in regards to our other municipal and not-for-profits through Advantage. So every year we provide them our annual reconciliation reports, which is an audited statement done by our auditors. They're all done by their auditors, which is submitted so that we can compare to say, where do we sit in regards to everything from housekeeping, how much we spend comparison to them, including maintenance and that kind of stuff. Now, albeit it isn't a perfect one, because some will do different accounting practices to present their maintenance and repairs. Some will say, oh, well, all maintenance and repairs comes from capital reserve. So then they have no operating repair and maintenance in comparison. But we do have a fair amount that we do have comparison to. For the most part, in that we present on that level of service with them, and we sit well within like the middle of the mark, sometimes on the higher end. It depends on exactly which home you're looking at and which region. But we do sit, it's not that we're sitting anywhere saying that we're nowhere that in the finance world, we're not concerned saying, oh my God, we're replacing things comparison to our peers that it has a slight scuff and we say throw it out, but we're also not at the bottom of the line saying, well, it broke down, but if you kick it really good, we can use it the next day. So at least we're sitting in a good spot that way. The only other thing to point at least in the trending, at least this is more on the redevelopment side, is that with redevelopment, especially when we're looking at the private sector, is that when we redevelop it, we get funding from the province as the construction fund subsidy to help cover the costs and everything with it. A for-profit will and has budgeted it and made sure that their useful life of the home is exactly to the amount of the funding. So they'll say, yes, after the 25 years, we are done with it. It is going by the wayside. Whereas we do have an overall look to say, look, we want to put the best thing in here or close to, so that we have a longer useful life, because we're not in the world of just saying after 25 years, we're closing the doors and opening up a new one, or saying, well, sorry, because the province isn't giving it to us, we're not going to extend or have a longer useful life.
Thank you, Marcus. Follow up? Go on.
Thanks for that response. Just a quick question then. Some of that type of reporting from Advantage, I mean, you've got private sector accounting versus fund accounting or public accounting systems, but accountants could figure that stuff out. Does it get reported in some degree back through the Long-Term Care Committee of Management? They take a look at some of those items in terms of level of service?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Not directly. That is something that we could look at if the committee was interested. We use that information and data as part of our budget lab, our budget building process. We also internally, Marcus has done an amazing job building dashboards for us and some comparative data so that we're looking at a per resident day level, so that we're looking to see how do the homes align across against each other? Do we have one home that it costs a lot more per resident day for this item than another home? Why is that? Is there a good reason at Grey Gables, for example, because of the layout and home areas that are 22 residents, that can equate to a higher cost per resident day than 150 and 101. So we do that at our own organization level. Then we use that data from Advantage to do a comparison across similar size long-term care operators across the province that are not-for-profit, municipal, or charitable, and do again that test back to say, are we an outlier? Where are there opportunities? And then because we're members of Advantage, we can reach out to Advantage and say, hey, we seem to be an outlier here. Can you get us connected with some of these homes and we can have those conversations? So all that to say, the report itself doesn't come to Committee of Management, but it is part of the work, the tools that we use to be as fiscally responsible as we can. Oops.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much, Jennifer and Marcus. I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Moving on to the next report, we have staffing requests and for 2026 budget and the 2027 forecast. And Niall is here to give the gospel on that. Oh. Oh, 4B. Oh, I apologize. Okay. Sue? I need a mover and seconder for the for 2B or 4B rather. Councillor Keaveney and Councillor Eccles. Welcome, Sue. Floor is yours.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully I get through this with my voice. It's much better than it was a few days ago. Mary Lou and I were attending the MFOA conference last week, though I think I came first and passed on to her and her close quarters. So we're hopefully past our contagious sections. Anyways, the report before you is going to outline our budget assumptions and a few key dates and timelines for our budget cycle. The annual budget is shaped by many assumptions regarding costs, inflation, supply chain issues, market trends, funding levels, and economic conditions. Overall, the finance team collaborates with their departments to forecast revenues and expenditures, and some of these with the more complex budgets actually start early summer and have continued right through now. Over the next few weeks, starting on Monday till around mid-October, we actually have budget meetings scheduled with Randy and Niall, Mary Lou and myself. And then we hope to bring you, excuse me, a levy increase preliminary budget at our October 29th meeting, along with some capital budget highlights. And then we will bring on November 26th, we're going to have a more fulsome budget presentation, and then committee of whole meetings on December 5th and 12th is where our plans lie for now. Some of our sources of budget assumptions, I'll just kind of highlight a few of those fairly quick. With utility costs, we typically base this based on industry projections. We look at our historical costs and if there's any fuel costs or changes that we're aware of. IT staff will provide staff with details on computers to be purchased, cell phones to be purchased, and they work with our analysts to provide their IS costs, which get allocated to each department. Within our salaries and benefits for unionized staff, we align our increases based on collective agreements or information based on HR for non-union. We have assumed in most cases that provincial funding is expected to continue at committed levels. The specific funding confirmed for the BEC until March 2026. Long-term care previously had used an advantage tool that they have been using, but they are now have reverted back to just using the case mix index from last year to continue with their funding because they found the tool was maybe not as accurate as had been in the past. We also face inflationary and supply chain issues. We are estimating overall, probably there's going to be a 2 to 2.5% increase in costs and inflationary costs over the next couple of years. We have, with our investment income, we have estimated a slight gradual decline. We were estimating that the Bank of Canada rate would drop 0.25% in October, but it was just announced last week that that has already happened. So I think, and a lot of our investments are the bulk of our investments are actually longer term right now. So we're pretty good to know what our investment income will be. With our insurance proceeds, what I've done is I've looked historically what our increases are in each type of insurance that we have based on the portfolio of assets or type of insurance. And I'm estimating about a 7.14% overall, which is about 100,000 in 2026 and 2027. With our audit fees, we've assumed a 4% increase each year based on the RFP that we put out last year. With the health unit, I had a very brief exchange with their senior manager of finance. Based on previous announcements, we were told up until 2026, the base funding for the health unit was likely going to increase by 1%. So we have assumed that for 2026 and 2027, that it will both be 1%. We have been offsetting some of those expenditures with reserve funding based on a couple of years ago when the funding levels changed so that it would mitigate our increase. So it's slowly increasing a bit. We have assumed within this that our tax policy adjustment that will be ranking back our multi-res rate by 0.25% along with the City of Owens Act. With our Canada Community Building Fund, that funding is secure for us until 2028. So that those amounts are secure in our budget of just a little over 3.3 in 2026 and 3.4 in 2027 and 2028. We had assumed, we recently got our OSIF announcement last week, which was after this report was done. We did actually hear from the Ministry of Infrastructure last week at MFOA that in 2026, the allocation and the way that the OSIF funding is calculated is now going to be based on a current replacement data that we currently have been submitting for the last couple of years. This will take place for the 2026 budget year, and they did say that the swing would only be 10%. So you're either going to go up max 10 or below 10, which previously was 15. So in this year's, the Grey County received about 11.3% increase over their allotment for last year. So that was a bit of a plus for us this year to get a little bit of extra money. So when I look at that, I think, okay, we're still trending up above the between the 10 and the 15. So in my mind, to me, that probably means like we shouldn't hopefully see a large decrease, but when they change the formula, you never know. There are quite a few other larger items that are affecting our budgets this year. We are discussing planning efficiencies. So I've been meeting with Scott Taylor and Kara, our financial analyst, to work with in the planning efficiencies and those lower tiers who have opted in or have asked to discuss. At this point, though, we are taking the approach that it will be a net levy zero impact. So either whatever costs we determine will either be covered by revenue or other fees because I think Randy, based on his previous meetings, everyone is sort of budgeting status quo because we're still quite preliminary and there's still lots of items to discuss. We do know that the roads exchanges are occurring and there was a report, so there is an inclusion of just over 1.2 million in the levy for that this year in our roads transportation expense. And as Jen mentioned, there are Rockwood redevelopment. There will be some one-time costs because the homes have to operate at the same time. So we're still finalizing those. And those will be in the budget. And we're also facing some unanticipated wage and salary pressures. In preparing this budget and discussing this with HR, the director of HR, Jen Moreau, there have been several business units where based on other items that have happened or other agreements that have happened in different places, we have been highlighted some salary disparity with some of our comparators. So they are currently looking at just seeing where that lies and how that's going to impact us in our 2026 and 2027 budgets. And we also have some prior decisions that will affect future budgets. We're increasing the levy just over 1.7 million for our asset management plan. In a previous report, the FRBFC-13-25, there was a healthcare funding transfer that was set for 200,000. So that has been changed in this year's budget. It was 209.5 last year. And we're also setting aside the 1% levies for affordable housing reserve, as it's been in the budget in previous years. And that's sort of the main budgetary impacts and stuff that are affecting our budgets right now. I can tell you that our assessment growth as of yesterday was just a little over $1.5 million. So trending fairly well. I have been sort of analyzing that weekly for the last month. We haven't seen very small increases over the last month, but sometimes all you need is a big report or a big assessment or change to go through and it can change it. But we've seen a very, very gradual increase over the last couple of weeks. So that's a good number for us. So anyways, that's all I wanted to discuss today. And does anyone have any other questions?
Thank you, Sue. Questions? I see the warden has joined us online. Maybe she's been there the whole time and I never noticed, but in any case, welcome, warden. Questions? Not seeing any questions. Councillor Gray.
Feels different sitting in this chair, but I figured it's like a dishwasher. You have to use it sooner or later. It's just not going to work when you go to use it. So thought someone's better sit in this chair or be another chair in the budget. Question regarding asset management planning. We're scaling up over the next 14 years yet to 2039. Continually, we look at adding staff in the role of facilities management, project manager, and we invest in different initiatives which operationalize different initiatives to reduce future costs. Do we adopt some of that in terms of preparing the asset management projections? And secondly, in the last several years, in terms of capital projects and the amount of external funding that's coming in as a percentage of funding those capital projects, is that aligned with our current asset management plan and future projections, or is there some maneuverability? We could always take the safe road and say, hey, let's plow $3 million a year away into asset management, but it's not responsible or practical to the general taxpayer to do it. So I'm just wondering, what kind of evaluation do we make on some of those conditions for asset management contribution?
I'll let Mary Lou, she's more familiar with our asset management plan than I am.
Through you, Mr. Chair. It's all about, in my opinion, striking a balance. So, I agree that you're trying to keep our assets in the best possible condition. And I'll use the example, and Pat can speak to this better than I can. But years ago, when we repaved a road, it was one lift and it might have been 20, 25 mil. Maybe 40. Now we do 2 lifts, which helps to extend the life and protect the condition. So there's some things that, you know, when we move to doing a second lift, obviously and if you're trying to work with the same amount of money, you're doing less kilometers and maybe not getting to the next road. And then it was a case of, if a road already needs to be reconstructed, well then, you know, that one's sitting, and we're going to try and protect the integrity of the good roads and keep them good. For sure, we're taking into account any money that we can get from other sources, obviously. But it's all about asset management is doing the right thing to the right asset at the right time. And so obviously that's the goal, and that's the goal of every department that we have here. It's easy for short life assets, such as computers. Jody can tell us that, you know, here's your planned replacement life cycle. Okay, we're good. Pat's team, working with their fleet manager, Marty Zevenbergen, they can talk about their equipment and their vehicles. You know, most of those, if you have like a pickup, say, that has like a 5 or 7 year life versus like a tandem, which might have like 12 years, those are easier. Where we get into the trickier situations is the roads, because and it's been less precise the longer the asset has of a life. And that's why we use for buildings, the building condition assessments, because sometimes it's good to have just an independent second set of eyes that doesn't look at something every single day and then go, oh, you know, I didn't see that. So it's a long-winded thing, and it's not a simple yes, and it's not a simple no. And then we're trying to prioritize as well. So if a department knows that they only have so much money, where does this rate in the pecking order? So they have their own internal criteria as to whether, you know, is this a life safety issue? Are we trying to protect the integrity of a structure? You wouldn't want a dome to collapse, et cetera. And then you work to figure out how best to use the money that you have. No different than, you know, years ago, we replaced an ambulance early because in theory, we should have kept it 2 years longer, but it had blown the turbos. So we were better to dump that ambulance and replace it versus one that showed it. Oh, it'll be 7 years old. It should be gone.
Thank you, Sue. I'm going to go to the CEO here for a minute, please.
Thank you for that. And thank you for that, Mary Lou, in terms of with respect to our asset management and making sure that I think the key thing is that, you know, we obviously use the best data, best information that we have available to us to be able to make some of those decisions in terms of what needs to be replaced, what's the time frame of what's to be replaced. I think, as you noted, Councillor Greg, as we start looking at things like facilities management and doing more preventive maintenance, some of the key things we'll need to start then tracking is making sure that through that preventive maintenance work, are we extending the life of our assets as a result of that? So we can have some benchmark data to be able to determine, are we able to extend when we need to replace certain things, for example. So, and I think for the most part, we're already doing a decent job of that from all of our building and facilities supervisors and operations. But to coordinate that in a way across the corporation to be able to hit the right mark, that sweet spot, so to speak, in terms of what needs to be replaced when, But prior to that, can we make sure we're doing preventive maintenance best practices to extend the life of our assets? So so I think that's going to be a key main focus over the next a couple years, to be able to really dig into that and see how we can improve, and then hopefully in the end see some cost savings as a result of some of those best practices that we can roll out across the corporation.
Thanks for that. Next question is an easy one. It's has to do with the removal of the carbon charge. Our staff going through some of those line items, such as fuels, the most obvious, that has become inflated in the last several years, as that's been a component of the cost, and anticipating 26 projections that recognize the removal of that carbon charge.
Thank you for the question. The answer is yes. So it's a two-part, for the departments that either if they have to look at their consumption as well. So you look at the cost, the unit cost, and then you're looking at the consumption. So do we expect the consumption would remain somewhat consistent? And then if you reduce the unit cost, then that should reduce that budget line item. But yes, that's absolutely been looked at.
Thank you, Mary Lou. Any other questions? Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just if I cycle back a second to Councillor Gregg's comments on the asset management, just two things to address there from my own perspective. One, the money that we're suggesting, the assumption being made is that the money is being spent, not just thrown into a reserve for asset management. I think that's the practice here at the county, whereas it might be different in the lower tiers. But two, this year we've seen some significant changes in projected costs versus what actually came in through tender. So when we're seeing those shifts, because post-COVID, we saw significant increases in costs of materials. We're seeing a slight decrease now. With respect to the asset management and the funding we're putting in, are we trying to take that tender process into calculations? I know it's an estimate and the best guess, but are we reflecting the change based upon some of the realized numbers we saw in 2025?
So we should have brought you the next iteration of the asset management plan before the July 1st deadline. We are behind for a couple of reasons. One was our asset management coordinator. She went on mat leave in March. The analyst that was helping me try to get to the finish line, he left for another opportunity. So we're a little behind in amongst everything else that's going on. So yes, we are taking a look at the unit costs. And I will say that this asset management plan will be somewhat of a placeholder because it's based on the assets that we currently own. Keeping in mind that you proceed with the road exchange, a lot of that just throws it out the window. So it really is going to be a placeholder, but yes, we do take a look at updating the unit costs, and transportation's doing that as best they can. Obviously you don't know how many tenders you're going to get, how competitive, any one company might be depending on how many jobs they've got booked, etc. So it is really difficult. But yes, it's absolutely taking a look at it.
Just one final comment, if I may, Chair, is that, in this report, we're suggesting inflation coming in between 2% and 2.5%. The increase here we're looking at doing for asset management is about 2.1%. So you're not, or a levy impact, sorry, that's what I'm going off of. So it's in line with what we're seeing. It's not, I guess, to go against Councillor Gregg's comment about being like too onerous on the taxpayer, we're trying to be pretty efficient. And I think when staff's response is to looking at how we address the 10-year capital and how we make adjustments midterm of that, how we review an assets like what we're doing with Rockwood Terrace as we're moving along. So I'm confident that staff are doing everything in their power to keep that number as low as possible while trying to maintain the same quality of service we're providing.
Always a challenge. Any other questions? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Mary Lou. Thank you, Sue. Now we come to the one that everybody's been waiting for. Niall. Well presented for the meeting this morning, I must say. Could I have a motion to receive or to support the recommendation and a seconder? Councillor Carlton, Councillor Deckard, thank you very much. Niall, the floor is yours, sir.
There we are. You see, that was the thing I was most nervous about coming into this room, and I failed this one set. I apologize, but thank you for the comment on my attire. Does that mean I can sit down and hands are going to go in the air and everything is good? Then it definitely has worked. Good morning, members of committee. I'm here to talk a little bit about staffing. And just like Jen said, she had a marker sitting behind her. I'm pleased I have an entire SMT sitting behind me to help out as we get into some of the difficult questions and the conversation as we move through this one. So over the last few months, the SMT team has been meeting to discuss the potential staffing needs for the county in 2026 and in 2027. And in having those conversations, we've really framed them in three key areas which are highlighted in the report. We've highlighted where the county is growing. As the county grows, as more people call Grey home, as more people are reliant on the services that we provide, and as the shift of those services changes over time, we need to respond to that growth. And as we've heard earlier today, we've seen assessment growth over the past year, and this is really the staffing element that responds to that assessment growth. That assessment growth comes from people being here, and so we have services which need to grow in response. So there are some pressures that we've identified within the existing services that the county offer, where there is, as a result of growth, the need to add new staff resources into the team. These are not about service level changes. These are about adding staff to the Grey County team to be able to retain and maintain the existing service levels that we provide as we respond to that growth. The second bucket, if you will, of staffing pressures that we've identified as a team is those that are needed in terms of strategic plans. As county goes on, as the council meets and goes through its term, it's approving and it's endorsing master plans, strategic plans and strategies which lay out the long-term goals and aspirations for Grey County. And within those, there's work that's needed. Some of that work is reinforcing existing service levels. Some of it will be additional of new service levels. Some of it will be in areas which we have not worked in the past. When we look at those strategic plans and those master plans and try to interpret the direction of council, there is a pressure that's placed on staffing at times, either new staffing, reallocation of staffing, or additional complements of staffing that are needed to help deliver on those. The third bucket that we looked at is where the county needs to be smarter in the way in which it works. And so as time goes on, there are things that change. We talked a little bit about asset management today. Over the last few meetings, we've talked about various different tools and technologies that are coming on board, which enable the county to become smarter, find efficiencies and effectiveness in the way in which we deliver services, meaning we can do more for more people without necessarily seeing a corresponding growth in the resourcing that we need to be able to do that. So this bucket's the continuous improvement bucket. It's when we look at the tasks that we're doing, look to see if there are different ways in which we can do it, look to see if there are pieces missing that would, if they were added, would allow us to be smarter in the way in which we make decisions. And so that's the third bucket that we looked at as a team. We then have tried to apply those two buckets across the 2 years of budget. Probably going to spend more time focusing on the 2026 year and stress the fact that the positions and the pressures that we see in 2027 are subject to 12 months of further review and refinement, indeed 18 months of further review and refinement as we move towards 2027. And so these are a little bit of a best guess at this point in time. We wanted to make sure that we were highlighting some of these pressures early so that council is aware of them. But there's a lot of space between now and then for us to refine these a little bit further. There may also be things that crop up between now and 2027 that change that forecast somewhat as well. So focusing on 2026, we've highlighted 4 positions that we think need to be added to the team in 2026. The first two being growth-related pressures. So that's a duty supervisor for the paramedic services and a mechanic for the transportation team. And so we're working through the redeployment piece of work. We're looking at growth of calls, as Kevin, as the director, noted a couple of weeks ago. We're looking at 8 to 10% growth in call volume already this year. And so we're expecting that call volume to continue to grow as the community shifts and changes and indeed grows across Grey County. The redeployment strategy helps articulate where we need to apply resourcing in the future to be able to respond to that. And 2026, we'll see another year of the rollout of that program. But over the last few months, we've noted the need for adding an additional duty supervisor to the team. This has a relatively negligible overall budget cost because this is actually offsetting a spend that we have in terms of relying on some of our unionized staff to step into the AR supervisor role periodically. So you'll see that the budget impact of this is nowhere near the same size as the actual position itself. We have a large number of lost hours when we have our supervisor team on board. Those lost hours are associated with the need for continuous training in our supervisor pool, the need for vacation, sick time, and so on and so forth. And so we always rely, and we will continue to rely on temporary supervisory coverage from the unionized side of things. This will not eliminate it, but certainly we'll be able to reallocate a lot of the costs that are paid for that towards applying this to this position. The float nature of the position means that it can just go where we need it to go. It's not fixed to a particular shift or a particular base or a particular area. It's a position which we can direct as needed. I'll admit, if we go any further into lost time hours conversation at this point, Garrett is going to become my best friend because it's taken me some time to wrap my head around it. There's been some very big spreadsheets on my wall as I've tried to work my head around it, but I am by no means the expert in that side of things. In the transportation side of things, we're looking for a mechanic. We've seen our fleet grow, and as our fleet's grown, without a corresponding increase in the mechanic staffing, we've seen a shift in the way in which we're doing maintenance. And Pat, correct me if I'm wrong, but whereas we would like to be aiming for around about 70% of our work to be proactive, trying to avoid problems from happening, and about 30% of the work being reactive in nature, we've actually seen that figure flip. And we're now seeing about 70% of our work being more reactive and only 30% of it being proactive. So we'd like to try and restabilize that balance and get back to being a bit ahead of the curve. So instead of repairing trucks before they, when they go wrong, spend more time looking after the trucks in advance. We're also seeing that fleet grow. And again, you'll see some of the figures of the numbers of pieces of equipment that the team look after. We're forecasting that growth continuing over the future years. And again, having that mechanic on board to be able to support that growth is something that we've identified as a priority for 2026. The law clerk is also growth related. Sorry, I should have flagged that one as a growth related position as well. We have a small but highly dedicated legal team at Grey County who are dealing with an incredible amount of work. I'm part of an email group called Group Agreements. Every single one of our agreements goes through our legal team to review, make sure that when we put our signatures on the bottom line, we're doing so with their support and not making sure that we're keeping the county straight. That folder can generate 10 to 15 agreements a day sometimes. We are dealing with in the order of 500 or more agreements every single year. Some of them are very small, some of them are very large. They are all complicated and they all keep the county signed up to various different things. And so our legal team look through all of those elements. We're also taking on increasingly complex bodies of work, and an example of that is the road exchange that we're currently going on. The road exchange involves a complicated dealing of property transition matters across the whole breadth and width of the county. And so we're having to make sure that we've got the right title inventories done, title searches are being done, and we are transferring lands between our lower tier municipalities, member municipalities, and ourselves, and vice versa, appropriately as we go through that process. We're finding ourselves getting into complex builds, such as the Rockwood Terrace, which involves a significant amount of legal review. Overall, what we're seeing is that the amount of work that the legal team is facing is beyond their capacity to be able to handle, and they are relying increasingly on outside counsel. There are times where it's unique and specific pieces of work where outside counsel is entirely appropriate to be lent on. But we've identified that particularly with some of the big projects like the road exchange, it would be far more cost effective to bring that work in-house and add a law clerk into the team to help support that work. The last one for 2026 is a coordinator of climate and environmental initiatives. And there's some detail in the report, but this is really related to the Going Green in Grey and the declaration of a climate emergency that Council has made, and the need for us to continue advancing the Going Green in Grey plan. So at this point in time, we're reliant on just a single member of staff in that team. And as Council will recall, a number of years ago, that team was funded with 3 full-time staff. So we are now on a significantly depleted staff resource within the Climate Environmental Initiatives team. And so looking for this role to be able to help us get back on track with implementing Going Green in Grey, and bringing back reports on the ways in which we're making advancements in that work. We do still have staff working on 2 specific projects. So Future Ready, which we've seen over the last few weeks, is just getting up and going, and Resilient Grey. Those 2 bodies of work are going on. They're kind of supplemental to and complementary of the Going Green in Grey plan, but they are separate bodies of work and both are filled with contract positions. So our existing contract positions have now come to an end, leaving us with just the manager in the team. We're also looking to advance 2 new student positions in 2026. As we've gone through the conversations, these will be applied in our long-term care sector and in, and I've completely drawn a blank on where the second one is going to go. Sorry. Clerks, there we go. So 2 student positions in 2026. And the need for these 2 student positions is the students provide a critical set of extra hands during the summer season when they're on break from college, university and school. And it's our opportunity to be able to invest back somewhat into the community and hopefully bring forward some municipal leaders of tomorrow. So we see this very closely tied with the strategic plan and the workforce development parts within working together for success, the Grey County plan. I will very briefly go over the ones in 2027 and then happily take questions or field questions to the team behind me as needed. So in 2027, we're continuing to see growth in the fleet. We'd like to add a second mechanic to the transportation services team, as I say, subject to review as we go forward, whether that would be necessary or not, but we're flagging that one as a growth pressure. We know that we need to do something around facilities management at the county. We've got a diverse portfolio of buildings. They're significant. They're a significant part of our asset. We have a significant team in various different departments that are looking after and maintaining those buildings on a week-to-week, day-to-day, and month-to-month basis. As we've started moving forward with a new position this year in the manager of facilities, we're looking at the opportunities that might exist for coalescing the facilities department in some way, shape, or form to try and find some efficiencies and effectiveness within that portfolio. We're not quite sure what the staffing needs might be around that, and so we put a flag out there for potentially a role in that area. I have no idea what that role might look like at this point in time. That will be subject to much more work and council scrutiny. In a similar sort of vein, as we've come off the employee engagement survey this year, started looking at the Joint Municipal Services Committee that has been struck and the priorities that Council's starting to pull out from that body of work. And as we're starting to look at activating that 4th part of working together, the Grey County strategic plan, we've identified the need for somebody to take a bit of a leadership role in terms of performance and culture. That might be primarily within Grey County. It might be a service which we're able to offer on a more broad basis. And again, don't entirely know what that looks like yet. Lots more work to be done, but that would be within the human resources team. And as we're starting to look at continuous improvement, one of the gaps that we've often found ourselves in, indeed we've had some good conversation this morning on this, is the reliance, the need for good quality, robust data sources on which we can make decisions. And so one of the conversations we've been having is how do we organize, manage, maintain, and give access to data to allow teams to make important decisions and bring them back to you. And so the need for a business analyst or a data analyst of some sort within our technology team and information services team has been highlighted. And in 2027, we'd like to continue the growth in the student pool. Again, the two specific roles that are flagged is one into the finance team and one into, and I've drawn a blank, communications. Thank you very much. The communications one we flagged because we do have a bit of a milestone in 2027 as we hit 175 years. And so having some additional capacity built into the team to possibly help reflect that was something that we flagged. And so with that, I will leave my mic alone and turn the chair back to you.
Thank you. Now, questions? You're happy if there's none? Well, we've got a bit of meeting time to chew up here yet, so I'll ask Councillor Eccles if he'd like to ask a question. Coordinator of Climate and Environmental Initiatives. Want to put more staffing into that category. And in 2027, then we want to get a facilities manager. Climate and environmental, I understand, and as you've just said, was looking at more environmentally, more climate friendly actions within our facilities and whatnot. Would that not be, so what I'm taking in then, that's just a stopgap from 2026 to 2027 when we have a facilities manager. Why? I'm just trying to figure out, if you've got this climate and environmental that it's looking at everything about being more efficient, more effective in our buildings and in our services, and then we're going to hire a facilities manager to do the same job? Or explain that one to me.
I get that on. Yes. Thank you for the question. So I'll take an initial crack. The two roles are quite different. So one of the gaps, and we've detailed in the report where we've got some existing gaps within the Going Green and Grey plan at this point in time. And really the gap we're trying to fill with the climate initiatives coordinator is in terms of the community engagement side of things. So within Going Green and Grey, it is both a corporate plan for us as an entity. It's also a community plan which covers the whole of Grey. And so one of the things that we currently have very limited capacity to be able to deliver on is that community outreach and the work where we can work with member municipalities and communities across Grey to find ways that they can both mitigate the changes, the ways in which we live and how they impact the environment and climate. And so that's one body of work. The second big body of work, which we're currently unable to resource, is really tracking the success of Going Green and Grey. And so this is where are the things that we've done that are making a measurable impact. So Going Green and Grey establishes incredibly ambitious targets of net zero by 2040. 50. There we go. 2050 community for net zero. That's an incredibly ambitious goal. And in order to get to that goal, we need to be able to track progress towards it. And at this point in time, we simply don't have the staff resourcing in place to be able to track that work. The facilities side of things, and facilities, you're quite correct, is one of the two single biggest drivers of our corporate emissions. The facilities side of things, we are seeing that increasingly embedded into that facilities role, inspired by some of the work that has been done to date. And so you look at some of our recent builds, we're working towards net zero ready builds, not quite net zero yet. So we are looking at how our buildings contribute towards climate change in terms of building new. We are looking at the ways in which we can implement programs into our existing building stock to reduce its impact, and similarly and likewise in transportation and fleet, the other big driver. Those programs are embedded within the department areas. Every now and again, they need encouragement and support. And that would be something that this role would be able to bring, but they are separate. And so we would see a growth in a facilities department very much embedding climate, environment, and building sustainable buildings within it. But the coordinator role has that cross Grey, cross member municipality, and tracking piece embedded within it.
Thank you, Now. Any other questions? Counselor Mackey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Niall, for taking the target on this morning. Sacrificial lamb, I believe. The climate change coordinator position, I think you mentioned overly ambitious. And I'm wondering if council needs to make some decisions around our going green and gray and whether or not we've been overly ambitious. I think the federal government right now is recognizing that they may have been over the last 10 years and are certainly making some changes around, you know, the year that they're going to mandate battery operated instead of gas engines. I think there is a change happening right now, more maybe a realistic change in what we can do, what we can't do, what we can afford to do. So I think we need to have a hard look at, you know, some of the commitments that we've made around our whole climate. We're doing our parts in lots of ways. I'm just not sure what we can afford to keep doing when I don't believe it's really our mandate anyways, but that's just my thoughts. Thanks. Well, there wasn't really a question there other than it was a comment, and I think we need to review where we're going in regards to climate change. Thanks.
Noting it's a comment. I won't try to come back about what I think the word I used was ambitious, not necessarily overly ambitious. And certainly I think we have got some ambitious targets. I'd also say briefly, a low-hanging fruit goal that's easily achieved is not necessarily a stretch. It's sometimes nice to stretch ourselves, even if we end up failing.
Councilor Nielsen?
Thank you very much, Chair. Now, during your conversation about this position, you mentioned there's the two contracts, and forgive me with the back and forth a little bit on this file. Can you just remind myself, what is the staffing complement now? What contracts and staffing ends at the end of 2025? Where do we actually sit going into 2026? The report does suggest that the team of 3 was established. I believe we're less than that, official full-timers. Can you just help me realize where we are now?
Certainly, and through you, Mr. Chair. This does go back some time, obviously. Reading back through the decisions of council and directions associated with going green and grey, the intent was that this was to be staffed with a complement of 3 staff, 2 full-time permanent positions and 1 contract position. One of the 2 full-time permanent positions was changed to a contract role, I believe, as an example of budget pressures. So at that point, it was 3 full-time positions, which was made up of 1 permanent and 2 contracts. The permanent position being the manager, the 2 contracts both being coordinators. We've now come to the end of both those 2 contract coordinator positions, so we are left with a staffing complement of 1. Come 2026. In between times, for full transparency, in between times, we have taken on 2 additional programs, which are largely fully funded, being Future Ready and Resilient Grey, and they are supported by their own independent contracted staff.
Thank you, Now. Councilor Gray?
Thank you now for presenting this report today. I guess I don't have a lot of questions. There might be 1 or 2 questions through this. This is a little bit more of a concern I'm going to express. Hopefully, as the county has grown, we would find efficiencies across the corporation, and we would be able to leverage those efficiencies and nominalize the increase to residents for taxes. In the last 5-6 years, our budgetary increase, so not just the tax levy, the budgetary increase of the county has been beyond significant. And I'm concerned when I hear again today that while we've had all this growth, yes, we're having pressures that come along with it, and we're having to hire new staff and add new roles. And we are going to have another document come back forward this year that's not just a budgetary increase, but it's going to be a levy ask increase of 5, 6, 7%. And once you shake that tree down and then you change your multi-residential ratio and you actually impact people. Now it's that 6 is 8, the 6 is 7.5. We haven't been able to find those savings or those efficiencies. This is my concern. If this was many businesses, over time, if you continue to elevate your expenses over and above revenues like this kind of trajectory is going, your accountant and your banker are going to have a sit down with you and they're going to explain the difficulties that you're having operating your business. There are, I know when we had the strategic plan session, we had an afternoon at the Bay Shore. I remember a couple of years ago saying paramedic services is going to be a very large challenge in the future. As our population ages here in Grey County, if we want to maintain that level of service, this is going to be an extraordinary expense that is going to occur. Health challenges to the whole system and we heard it a week ago with the CAO and board, CEO, CAO, speaking about the graying of the population and the challenges that's going to present. I think we have got to find efficiencies and more opportunities to support council in providing a budget that is more responsive of a 2 or a 3%, more inclusive of acknowledging all that tax growth that we've had in the last 5, 6, 7 years. Supplemental assessment growth of north of $1 million is wonderful. It's also wonderful to be able to acknowledge that and leverage it and increase services, but not to increase and leverage it and still ask another 6 or 7% from the taxpayer every year. I can understand it's demonstrated the ask for the duty supervisor for paramedic services, the mechanic for transportation services over 2 years, 2 roles. At what point do we start to look at the private sector to service some of our fleet needs now? We can't keep growing the corporation, 1,147 employees. What was that number 15 years ago? I mean, our growth has been monstrous. And that comes with OMERS contributions. It comes with significant overhead. It comes with challenges in downsizing again afterwards. The law clerk, you demonstrated well the need in the road exchange, but I question why we would onboard the full-time role yet. I think perhaps it's a contract type of need. Council's perhaps giving direction for one particular project. So let's check that project off and then not have an FTE in the corporation long-term. I think looking at perhaps going to some private garages, perhaps to supplement if we've got that much difficulty in our mechanics and servicing our fleet, is there an opportunity to experiment for a year or 2 and bring this back? Again, the Climate and Environmental Initiative, there's a project that council set forward several years ago. There's objectives, but again, you put a project there, you try to check it off, and you try not to just onboard ongoing expenses that build year after year. So I'm concerned with how and I know it's council's prerogative. Council's the one that okays these projects. But I think it's about time council looks at the increase of the budget in the last 6, 7 years, the total budget and the continual ask for more and more and more. And we just have to recognize that some of us have more ability to pay, which is wonderful. But that shouldn't be taken for granted for those in the community that I saw a number, I think, in preparing our strategic plan in Owen Sound, we just forwarded this morning, household incomes of $71,000. And that's before tax. So I think it's about time. We can ask to add more services all the time, but a lot of these services are not what people are worried about at the dinner table when you're talking about real household incomes and the real pressures on single families, single individuals in the community. I think it would be good to take another stab at some of these rules before we just okay moving forward with them at this time. So not a lot of questions there. I guess there's one on the contract potential with the law clerk, but more concerns with onboarding the positions on a continuum.
Thank you for those comments, Councillor Greg. With respect to the comment around efficiencies, what I can indicate to the committee is that each department always looks for opportunities to be as efficient as possible with respect to their operations and their budgets. We have started looking at things like lean processes, project management frameworks to be able to look at those opportunities where we can be efficient, where we are trying to then limit the asks that are beyond then the current capacity of each of our departments in our current operations. These asks, as lots of conversations before we even get to this, a report that's being presented to the Budget and Finance Committee, which hopefully the committee is aware that you know, based on the conversations and discussions with the senior management team, Niall and myself, to look at what makes the most sense at this point in time based on the growth pressures and based on factoring in some of those other efficiencies that are ongoing. This is what we're proposing and recommending in terms of maintaining levels of service that we're able to provide based on what's currently on the docket, so to speak, what's currently on the plates of each of our respective departments. As Niall's clearly noted, you know, the duty supervisor, the mechanic, the law clerk in terms of the question about the contract. So committee may recall that from our legal services team, we at one point had a director of legal services. We had a solicitor as well, plus we had two other positions within the legal services team. So at one point we did have 4. Right now we have 3. As Niall indicated, based on the volumes of work beyond just the road transfer project, we're still dealing with legacy property matters and issues from roads that were transferred a few years ago or a number of years ago that we're still dealing with. So just as an example, in terms of the volume of work, I think my recommendation would be to not make this a contract role. That I think the volume is there for sure to require a permanent law clerk role. This will help create efficiencies across the corporation. Right now, we're seeing a bit of a bottleneck when it comes to review of agreements, policies, and procedures, and it's just based on the volume that we currently have that's going through the corporation. And so that's why we're recommending and bringing this forward. And so when we look at these things, we're looking at it through a lens of what makes the most sense right now, based on the pressures that we're seeing corporately, that will help alleviate some of those pressures and create some efficiencies across the corporation. And that's what we're recommending, at least for the 2026. As Niall noted, we need to do some further review and analysis on the 2027. Those are placeholder positions at this point. We need to do some further analysis on what those positions will look like. But we anticipate that there will be some sort of form of position that will likely be required, again, to create some of those efficiencies and opportunities across the corporation. So I'll just leave it at that, but we're bringing this forward based on quite an extensive review and analysis of what we think we require at this stage in order to be able to move forward with the current projects and everything that's identified through our strategic plan, based on the growth pressures we're seeing, and what we're seeing across the corporation.
Thank you, Randy. Councillor Greg.
I think just to wrap up my comments, one of the subject matter, one of the paragraphs spoke to the joint municipal services. There's one right there. I wonder, I know in Owen Sound, we have some mechanics on our full team fleet. And I just wonder, can we interact better? Can we explore more opportunities to share services such as that? We've got a committee struck now at the county. That's the whole intention of it. And then the first outcome I see is to add another role in language. So right instantly, I'm concerned when we're trying to evaluate a committee to find savings and efficiencies, and there's an ask for a new FTE. And then my other comment would be that the climate change portfolio, going green and gray, used to be within the planning department, and perhaps and then it was pulled out of planning and a standalone within corporate services. Maybe it should be evaluated to be returned back within the planning department. It is planning. And it's what you can afford. I'm not sure. I think maybe Councillor Nielsen maybe said, or someone said, it's what you can afford. It's no different than your house. You could spray foam 4 inches. You could spray foam 8 inches. You could go 12 inches. It's better and better and better. What can you afford? So that's my summary. Thanks, Deputy Warden.
Thank you. Any other questions? The chair has a question for Pat, actually. Pat, I note in the section of talking about the proposed mechanic position that our mechanics currently maintain 6 vehicles for Bright Shores transport vehicles. I presume Bright Shores owns those vehicles. In my mind, that would be a good opportunity to reduce the workload on the current mechanics. Send those 6 vehicles to Councillor Gregg's point, to Owen Sound. Perhaps their mechanics would like to look after them, or a private operator for that matter. I don't remember those vehicles coming into our care, but at least that would be something I would look at anyway. Not to suggest that we maybe don't need the additional mechanic at some point, but yeah, I'd soon hive those off to someone else. Anyway, that said, are there any other questions from the committee? Councillor Mackey. Oh, sorry, Niall, or Pat, do you want to respond to that, please?
Yeah, I think we originally started taking on some of that work because of our staff's kind of accreditation and expertise in ambulances. There's a lot more they do than just, the 4 wheels and the engine. Like there's a lot of other add-ons in the ambulance that our guys are qualified and that do now. So I think that's why we started taking on. But yeah, it does create another 6 vehicles on the checklist that makes it harder for our guys for sure.
And briefly to add to that, there's a chargeback. So we have shop rates which are charged out for that service. Indeed, all our paramedic vehicles, we have shop rates, and that perhaps speaks to the earlier question. We adjust our rates; they're just short of shop rates, so that we remain competitive for that. But it is a source of revenue to the mechanics and the fleet side of things.
Thank you, Councillor Mackey.
Thank you, Chair Millen, and through you to Pat. Just in regards to the mechanics position, I'm certainly a proponent of preventive maintenance, and I think that's the value that we see from those mechanics positions, and they very well may pay for themselves. Are you able to drill down into that? What savings by doing all the preventive maintenance as opposed to the reactive maintenance? Typically, if I hold my brakes off of my truck and don't do the regular maintenance, then I'm all of a sudden going to have a $2,500 bill. So I suspect over all of our vehicles that there may well be savings in having that position. Do you have any sense, I guess, on what that actual savings, or it's really paying for that position, but overall we're in a better position because of an addition of mechanics? Thanks.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. It's hard for me to quantify that exact number, but we know just from our experience that there is the vehicles that are coming back because something fails on it that was there 2 months ago, that if we'd had time to do the preventive maintenance, then it wouldn't have to, right? So we're doing the best we can, and the guys do send some stuff out to private garages, but a combination of a lot of things. Our mechanic staff is Well, they're kind of the same age as me, which apparently I'm not a young man, I guess. So, you know, we are looking, we've got the apprentice now, we're kind of looking to fill, you know, to start keeping the kind of the lineup going. And there's, you know, there's been some sick time over the, you know, incidents over the years or whatever, but it is one of those things where you just feel like your team is just really strained. And if we can get that preventative maintenance, then like you said, if we get the work to get it done, then it saves you future work. As it is, it's like that thing you're always playing catch up. You can just never seem to get to the point that you're going to make the work easier on yourself. And that's kind of where we're at right now. We're just far enough behind that we just can't seem to get caught up. We just consistently are falling behind on preventative maintenance.
There we go. Thank you, Pat. Councillor Eccles. Maybe we should keep the law clerk position in place. For the whole mindset that a former CEO said to me, well, we've got to continue. We've got to do this because nobody is. Or the province has given it up, or the feds have given it up. So it's downloaded to us and we're doing it. What I see here strategically is we've taken on a massive amount that I'll argue we've got no reason to be even in it. Point was just brought forward by the chair. We don't have time to do preventative maintenance on our own equipment, yet we're looking after Bright Shores. Because Bright Shores couldn't find anybody else to do it, so we jumped in. We keep our rates just slightly below what they are. Bright Shores is getting a great deal on it. Oh, which is a provincial health care. The next thing they're going to be coming for us and asking us not just for a bunch of capital, operating budget to keep it going. Got to look at that being the health unit and a few other of those things. So let's keep the law clerk on, but not doing anything to deal with properties, figuring out what do we get out of so that we can operate this under, as Councillor Gregg says, a position of fiscal responsibility to our community. We're talking about, yeah, we're taking on all this assessment and growth is wonderful. And oh, isn't it going to be? We're going to be in a flow of cash. Well, apparently it's not, because every time we turn around, we've grown. We've got to ask for 6%. Growth isn't paying for itself, even with development charges. It costs us continuously. We're going to run this as a, you know, somewhat of a break-even point. And it certainly sounds like most of these positions are not, never will be, taking on other stuff to generate revenue. Yeah, we're getting $75, but it's costing us $100. I might have been a little facetious in saying keeping the law clerk, but strategically, we've got to really look at it, Councillor Gregg, you're correct. Just because somebody else isn't doing it in the municipality, in the county, does that become by default the county's got to do it? I don't, you know, have the law clerk make it back that no, it's not the county property taxpayer's job. We keep adding on to these things. You know, here we are in climate and environmental initiatives, trying to meet Canadian federal government commitment, a provincial government commitment. I really, really, and that's not really for today's discussion in this, but strategically, we keep going like this, by 2035, we'll have met the climate initiatives for sure, because nobody can afford to live here and everybody's going to disappear. So we won't need to worry about everybody driving here to the county. My rant for the morning. Thank you. No, I'm not promising. But I'll be quiet.
So through you, Mr. Chair, so the 6 ambulance vehicles that we look after for Bright Shores bring in about $40,000 revenue over the last few years.
Thank you for that now. Any other questions? Okay, not seeing any. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Sorry, everybody, if they'd mind putting their arms in the air just a little bit higher, that is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you now for that. Thank you, Pat, for your support there. We have a closed meeting matter to deal with. The motion is that the Budget and Finance Committee does now go into closed session pursuant to section 239, subsection 2 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended to discuss labor relations or employee negotiations, specifically bargaining updates. And Jen Moreau will be taking us through that. Would someone care to move that we go into closed session? Councillor Carlton, seconded by Councillor Eccles. Thank you. All those in favor? That is carried.